Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Gaza. Well, greetings, brothers and sisters, comrades all. It's a special honor to present these few remarks on the third day of this important SWA Workers' School. I know everyone has been working hard and this is the last day, so hang in there with me. Sorry I couldn't be there in person to meet and greet everybody. As a teacher, my work is in education, both as one who acquires information and then passes it along to others. While doing this, I'm not just observing the movement, I'm in it with you. That's my role here today. Partly it is gaining vocabulary, partly it's sharing facts, but most important of all, it is helping each of us develop a worldview, a perspective that reflects the experience of the working class and a point of view that helps us to distinguish between friends and enemies and to clarify problems and the paths to solutions. This is the kind of education needed to advance our struggle. So let's get started. This presentation is organized in 4 parts. The reason political education is so important. The focus of our political education is the crises we face. What are the basic issues our political education should address? And finally, how political education is part of the class struggle. There will be plenty of time for discussion, so take a note and prepare to join in. It's not about what I say, but about what makes sense to you. So we have to focus on method, how you can think for yourself, not just giving you a set of answers. We begin by targeting the context of our daily lives, how to understand our current situation. Of course, there's lots of variation in this. Think about all the brothers and sisters in this school. Our daily lives can be very different. We come from different places, different industries. We are from different generations and genders and sexual orientations. Our differences vary in many ways. But even so, in each case, we have this set of questions: what, who, how, and when. What is the problem we're dealing with at any given moment? Who is involved as victim and as victimizer? How did this problem develop? And when or what is the history of this problem? At any given moment in our struggle for every campaign, it would be important for emerging leadership to be able to give a 5 to 10 minute rundown on these questions at almost every gathering, both in formal meetings and over coffee or a beer with fellow workers. Everyone should know this script. Just like we are force-fed advertisements for the commodities in the market. Because check this, things don't go better with Coke, they go better with the fighting leadership of the SWA. So let's take a quick look at some of the key issues. For every worker, a key question is how much money we make for the work that we do. Can we call it a living wage? Can we feed, clothe, shelter, and enjoy life with our families? If there was a national standard of $15 per hour, about 7 million people would be lifted out of poverty, including over 1 million Black people. Now, on the surface, we can measure the struggle by which different interest groups impact legislatures. Some win and some lose. And we need to check this because we often lose and we need to win. But Washington, California, and Massachusetts are the states with a minimum wage of $15 an hour or more. On the other hand, 5 states have not adopted a state minimum wage: Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, South Carolina, and Tennessee. Did you notice something? Those last 5 states with no minimum wage are in the South. Describing the situation is where we start, but does not answer the question of why this is the case. To get at this answer, we need to discuss the fundamental logic of the capitalist system. In fact, almost any wage that gets set, of course, some more than others, is just about negotiating the terms of our exploitation. As a capitalist, we'll never pay the wage that represents the value we create. But we know, and what we know, is that when workers organize, when we get unions, when we collectivize our strength, we can fight for and get better pay, safer working conditions, health benefits, retirement benefits. It's never what we deserve, but it can be more. Don't we need to think about what it would take to get paid what we're actually worth relative to the value we create? The capitalists lie to hide this basic fact. We have to tell the truth, get the preachers to sermonize about it, the cultural workers to sing and write poetry about it, and we have to tell it over and over again. Now, another word on poverty. I hope you all can see these slides. Over 13% of the population is below the official poverty rate. But that rate is so low that statistics are usually given at 150% or 200% of the official rate. Now in 2022, the official rate was one person at $13,590, two persons, $18,300 and some dollars, and for 4 persons, $27,700 and some dollars. In other words, check this now. If you're a single person and you make more than $6.50 an hour, you are not poor. Now that's the view of the federal government. That's not our view. Of course, this should be contrasted with the extreme polarity of wealth that exists. By 1970, the income share of the top 1% had fallen to over 10% of all income. 1% got 10% of all the income in 1970. 50 years later, 1% got 20% of all the income, almost doubling. In other words, the situation is polarizing. Check this map, especially in the southern region. You see, the darker it is, the poorer it is. In the southern region, workers have to fight to end poverty. Another issue is violence. The United States is one of the most violent countries in the world. In the US, there are over 120 guns for every 100 people. In other words, more guns than people. Not only are people armed, but the military transfers weapons of war to local police departments. Now, a mass killing, that's defined as 4 or more people being killed in one incident. It increased from 273 of these mass killings in 2014 to 8 years later, it increased to 647. Even this last 2 or 3 weeks, we see people being shot down all over this country. But this is especially true in the South. Now, one reason, of course, is mental illness. Nationwide, almost 1 in 5 people, that's 47 million people in the US, are living with some kind of mental health condition. And to make things worse, the drugs people take are also associated cause for violent behavior. And 2 ways that this lethal shoot down occurs. First, the police shoot us down, but then also because of the crisis we face as individuals and as our social organization is stressed, we shoot each other down. What is clear is that the gun lobby, the National Rifle Association, and others is the agent of capitalist rule, and they want even more guns without any regulation or background checks. Now we come to the big picture of what's happening to planet Earth. Damn, we're in a world of trouble, to use a phrase. The great advances in production and excessive use of resources without much care given to sustainability, nature is surging back, giving human survival an environmental ass kicking. Some issues impact all of us, and this is one of them. Climate change is real, and we have to make sure that our workers' movement educates itself about this. We all have stories to tell about it, but let me just mention one example. Beaumont, Texas. Now, this is a town of 115,000 people, 47% Black, 18% Latinx, 4% Asian. That's a total of 69%. Now, Hurricane Harvey hit hard in 2017. Harvey was the wettest tropical hurricane on record in the United States. The resulting floods inundated hundreds of thousands of homes, which displaced more than 30,000 people and prompted more than 17,000 rescues. There's no planning model to anticipate this kind of extreme weather. There's no capacity to deal with the water, flooding overground, or from unprecedented rainfall either. The main issue in Beaumont, as you can see from this slide, you see the flooding and then you see the oil refineries. And two of these refineries have become the largest in the United States, right there in Beaumont, Texas, ExxonMobil and Motiva. Now, the Saudi government, Saudi Arabia, has had complete ownership of the largest oil refinery in the United States, Motiva, which is located in Port Arthur, right next door to Beaumont. ExxonMobil is the largest descendant of Standard Oil Company, the business that John Rockefeller founded in 1870. The family's wealth today largely stems from this 19th century oil tycoon. But check this out. This will tell you something about what the economy is like today. ExxonMobil is currently expanding with a $2 billion investment, but it will only produce 50 full-time jobs. And most of these hires won't come from Beaumont. People talk in Beaumont about the license plates of the people who work there, and they're not Texas, it's Mississippi and Louisiana. They're importing people. They don't want to hire Black and brown people to work in the refinery. And of course, some of the contradictions among our class that we have to deal with is that some of the brothers and sisters who work there make $50 an hour. They're not inclined to either A, understand that people who are making less than the minimum wage are their brothers and sisters and they have to fight too. And then secondly, they also overwhelmingly voted for Trump and overwhelmingly are climate deniers because they're trying to protect their jobs. So we have a lot of work to do within our class. In some, we face the end of democracy. Of course, this is about what we have now, but it's debatable if the US has ever had real democracy, founded as a slave state with a demonic genocidal impact on the First Nations in North America. But some reforms have been made, and we're in the process of seeing even them get smashed. We want everyone to vote because we're in the majority, but the rulers want to limit the vote because that's the only way they can continue to rule. by controlling the rules of the state. One of the ways they do this is by changing the rules of the electoral game, gerrymandering, and voter suppression of all kinds. Now they make direct intervention with their corporate structures. Isn't it interesting that even Thomas Jefferson had it right on this point? As a founding father of his slaveocracy, he saw the danger of corporate takeover. The end of democracy and the defeat of the American Revolution will occur when government falls into the hands of lending institutions and moneyed corporations. Now we have it as a matter of law, because by law, corporations are considered people, free to use their financial resources to control the political process. Okay, in terms of the four sectors of our lives that we have just commented on, economic life, social life, the environment, and politics, the word that sums it all up is crisis. We're being pushed to the limits, and the transformation of capitalism is just beginning, bearing its fangs and publicly declaring authoritarian rule, fascism. But what is a crisis? A condition of instability or danger, as in social, economic, political, or international affairs, leading to a decisive change. Now I'm putting the question to you all. Are we in a crisis? Think about your lives, think about your community, think about your industry, think about the society in general. So after asking the four questions about the crises we face, what, who, how, and when, we come to the question of why. And we have to, in this context, and here I'm reflecting some of what you all have already discussed, we have to make a distinction between tactics and strategy, the day-to-day and the long-range view we need. When we're attacked, when a problem emerges, people often spontaneously fight back. What they do are tactics, but we need to prepare before such uprisings and being angry about something. We need a plan, a strategy, and that's where the SWA comes in. Everybody know peanuts? We very well know the difference in the way, this difference between strategy and tactics in the way we lead our lives. We have long-range plans and a basic method. Then we also know we have to improvise within that plan. So, for example, we plan to buy a house and we have a savings plan. Maybe on a monthly basis, we put away some money. But shit happens and we have to make adjustments. Strategy gets set, but tactics are fluid, and our experience with them must be constantly summed up and evaluated. So for strategy, we have to get to the why. Now, our main approach in the long run to why is to understand the fundamental logic of the capitalist system. The ruling class controls the people, us, by the control of our minds, how we think about the society and our lives. They put billions into developing and maintaining their tools for doing this. We are challenged to join the battle of ideas. This requires study, preparation. We need to know the history of the capitalist system and how it has been defeated. We need to study the history of post-capitalist societies. The capitalists teach us to be stupid, ignorant. We need to reject that and get working class people to study political economy, even philosophy. You know, people study religious documents for salvation. We need to study political economy for liberation. If we're too busy to study, then you're not serious about planning to transform society by building the power of the working class. Study is not an option, it's a necessity. Now, here are the three fundamental contradictions in the capitalist system. The capitalists fight capitalists, the capitalists fight workers, and the capitalists seek world domination. But capitalism is always in crisis. Now, the capitalists compete with each other by trying to produce as much as possible. But that creates a glut in the market, and the economy slows down as prices decline. This is a crisis of overproduction. Capitalists try and use new tools, advances in technology, but in the end, their profits don't come from the fixed costs of their technology and raw materials, but from the variable cost of labor. What they pay us from exploiting human labor, that's where they get their profits from. So reduce the quantity of labor by bringing in technology creates another crisis. More and more, the capitalists are gambling by inflating the value of resources for sale, then creating a market based on increasing debt. But at some point, debt has to be paid, hence another crisis. And another thing, we got to be careful that we don't assume the capitalist rulers talk like we do. They compare Wall Street, the banks and financial institutions, to Main Street. Now, their Main Street ain't nothing like the streets where we live. Their small businesses are not the tiny little shops that they try and get working class people to think they can start and use and then become capitalists. Check the definitions in this slide. When they say small business, they are still talking about millionaires. Take the one on the left, SBA, the Small Business Administration. They say even if you've got to work 1,000 workers with income of over $40 million, you're still a small business. They don't talk like we do. And that's part of the battle of ideas, is to constantly refute the language they use to seduce us to think like them. The motion of capitalism is not the competition of their early theory talks like Adam Smith and so on, but the motion is always toward monopoly. Companies getting bigger and bigger by buying up or destroying their competition. Now, here are a few examples. Defense contractors. Since 1993, consolidation has reduced the number of large defense firms from 107 to 5. Or take drugstores where we go. CVS controls 58% of the drugstore business, Walgreens controls 31%, and Rite Aid controls 10%. That's almost the whole thing. 3. Railroad. The nation's 4 largest railroads control 86% of all grain and oilseed traffic. A single railroad, BNSF, controls 47%. Airlines. 4 carriers control 80% of the market: American, United, Delta, and Southwest. Or rental cars. Because of recent mergers, 3 companies control, but they hide it by using different names. Enterprise. They own Enterprise, Alamo, and National. Hertz. They own Hertz, Dollar, and Thrifty. And Avis. Avis owns Avis and Budget. And I know somebody in this audience has a sweet tooth. Check this out. Candy. 2 companies, Mars and Hershey, control 75% of the candy market. So in other words, the economy is being dominated by these giant monopolies. On a global level, monopoly becomes imperialism. Like in the home market and the development of monopolies, at the global level, companies strive more and more to get a bigger share of world domination. And they get into conflict, and that leads to war. Fundamentally, this is an important way to understand the war in Ukraine. Countries fighting for spheres of influence, another way to say world domination. And the people of the Ukraine are simply the battlefield on which this is going on, and they get sacrificed. Now, like Jefferson, here even Eisenhower had something intelligent to say about the war machine. Every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies in the vital sense a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and not clothed. This world is in arms is not spending money alone. It is spending the sweat of its laborers. It's spending the genius of its scientists, the hopes of its children. That's Eisenhower, a general who became president of Columbia University as well. Now, to cover over their evil deeds, the capitalists play with our minds, dragging us into being like them vicariously in the games we play. They don't even hide it. Take their game Monopoly. But progressive writer Elizabeth Maggie Phillips created Monopoly in 1904 to teach players about the dangers of wealth concentration, originally called the landlord's game. It celebrated the teachings of the anti-monopolist Henry George. So it was against the concentration of wealth. But following the stock market crash in 1929, Charles Darrow flipped the meaning of this game by reorganizing the game to teach people to want to own as much as possible and worship wealth. And I don't know about you all, but every time I play the game, people don't end up happy and loving each other. They end up in conflict. Now, Bert Ullman, a professor at New York University, created Class Struggle, a board game based on Marxism. From 1978 to 1983, he was president of a company he called Class Struggle, Inc., the company that originally produced and marketed the game. So class struggle can be waged in cultural terms, even while we're playing games. And this game is still available if you can find it. A strategic goal must be to rein in monopolies. We have done this before by breaking up the Standard Oil Trust of the Rockefeller dynasty and the big AT&T. But as I've shown, monopoly is as American as apple pie, and they're getting bigger every day. Okay, now let's take a look at the big picture and ask what basic issues should we get clarity on in order to have a clear strategic view of what we have to do for the goal of workers' power and social transformation. Now, this is a tentative list we need to think about. It's a draft. Each area workers' assembly needs to work on this and make sure that all leaders have basic information they can discuss on each of these points. This is an agenda for the SWA workers' assembly process to figure out for each local area. These 10. Now I'm going to run through them. This is not the slide I wanted, but anyway, these slides are going to be available. I know this is hard to read, but we need to pay attention to population. For each SWA city, county, and state, and the three basics for total population that we should just have at the top of our head are the total population, the percent Black, and the percent Latino. Our potential base is the working class majority of each of these numbers, overwhelmingly. And that's what we're fighting for, our market share of the population. We're not a minority, we are a majority. Now, in terms of capital, after World War II, industrial production of the US ruled the world, but that is no longer the case. This is a fundamental point because production is the base of the economy. But now, the United States has moved from General Motors, 1979, the largest employer was General Motors, was 620,000 workers. Now it is Walmart with over 2 million workers. Amazon has 1.5 million. Now, Walmart, as you can see from this map, is a leading employer in 22 states. And of course, it dominates the South. While we fight where we are, our vision and strategy must take on the commanding heights of the economy. And that means we have to understand the story of David and Goliath. Our main strategic weapon is organization. Each workplace is a battlefront we can win with organization. But the SWA is not limited to the starting point of each individual workplace. Our goal is a workers' movement in which multiple workplace organizations unite to build workers' power, a network of militant workplace-based committees fighting in unity. As you can see from this slide, work stoppages declined just like union membership. As said earlier, to the extent that there is some democracy in our country, it is under attack. Cities vote with the Democrats, but the rural parts of each state vote Republican. So after each census, the state legislatures redraw legislative districts, and whichever of the capitalist parties get control, they gerrymander. And that means what this map shows. If it was done equitably, it would be one thing. But if you Jimmy rig the situation, it turns out differently. Of course, elections are a critical battleground, but this government has been set up by the capitalists. So we don't expect to win what we want by playing their electoral game, but we win what we can. And we always use elections to grow strong by advancing our program. Now, the SWA has a program that is putting forward in the context of this move toward the 2024 election. We have to use this program. We have to use it everywhere to help us build the movement we need. We have to expose the people who are against the majority of people in this country who are working class people. And that's why we have to take the workers program that the SWA has developed out. Every local workers assembly needs to study that program and use it anytime the electoral process is being discussed. Are you with us or for us? Which side are you on? Okay, now the national history of racist domination focuses on people who are Black, brown, and yellow. As this map demonstrates, the historical crisis for the South is the oppression of Black people. This is the legacy of slavery. But this map only deals with population density. But the historical reality is that Black people catch a lot of hell wherever they are. The only possibility for a workers' movement is that it is organically linked to the fight for Black liberation. This means that when Black people fight for self-determination, that workers have a role to play, as the vast majority of Black people are workers just like them, you all. Now, the way change is made is when social movements fight ruling class power and transform society. Sometimes they succeed, and sometimes they don't. But we never really fail if we learn as we go, and thereby grow stronger after each battle. The slogan we need is fight, fail, learn, fight again, fail again, and learn some more, and then fight on to victory. First, the SWA has a strategic goal of building a 21st century workers' movement in the South. The entire country is counting on us. Our movement must connect with all allies to join in. The professionals of all kinds, the ministers, the media folks, everybody. Every workers' assembly is a freedom cauldron to stir the minds of workers with political education linked to tactics of fight back that represent the development of a workers' movement. This is how we will form a common vision, a common strategy for attaining workers' power. We have to build a relationship with all other social movements. When an allied social movement marches, that's when a contingent of workers marching under the SWA banner must join in. When the women march, the SWA brigade must be there. When Black people march, the SWA should fly its banners high. And so on with the environmental justice folks, the youth, the Latinx forces, really every fight for freedom, justice, and equality. In every workers' assembly, the workers must be educated to understand their relationship with every other social movement. Now, cultural activity is the food for the soul. When the labor movement sang, when the civil rights movement sang, the collective spirit became unstoppable. The more we fight, the more cultural workers will step forward and put forth the songs, the poetry, the images that will inspire us even more. There will be poems to be memorized and repeated often. Take this one by Claude McKay. If we must die, let it not be like hogs, hunted and penned in an inglorious spot, while round us bark the mad and hungry dogs, making their mock at our accursed lot. If we must die, oh, let us nobly die, so that our precious blood may not be shed in vain. Then even the monsters we defy shall be constrained to honor us, though dead. O kinsmen, we must meet the common foe. Though far outnumbered, let us show us brave, and for their 1,000 blows deal one death blow. What though before us lies the open grave? Like men and women, we'll face the murderous, cowardly pack, pressed to the wall dying, but fighting back. And also remember the words of Langston Hughes. Let America be America again, the land it never has been yet, and yet must be, the land where everyone is free. Of course, at the heart of every political education session is to confront patriarchy and change minds to bring forth the full power and leadership of women. Not only is this a form of capitalist exploitation, patriarchy, it is also a dangerous set of views and practices deep in the working class, in general and within every ethnic group. The truth is that women have always done the work that has kept our institutions alive and our movements moving. But the fullness of what needs to be done is twofold. Women's leadership is part of everything we do. But also we need women to self-organize. We needed CLUE, the Coalition of Labor Union Women. We need women to organize and give leadership in every workers' assembly. This is not only subjective, what we want sort of abstractly in our minds, it is an objective necessity. Women make less pay and are not welcomed into every kind of job. We fight against all forms of gender discrimination. Of course, we extend this to all other forms of homophobia and discriminatory attacks against our trans brothers and sisters. Then there is the environmental crisis. We've already mentioned this. But at a strategic level, climate change requires that our so-called way of life has to be fundamentally changed, or our planet will die. Maybe other life forms will continue, but not humans. Every coast will be underwater. All storms will get stronger and ravage where we live and work. Temperatures will get higher and lower at times not expected. The seasons will change, and animal and plant life will change. The first victims are poor people and Blacks and Latino people. Again, study of our local conditions has to figure into the political education of every workers' assembly. Now, to understand what's going on, we have to understand the historical processes we are living in. Of course, there's an earlier historical experience that should be studied. Slavery, early forms. But the immediate task for us is to understand the dynamics of how the industrial system has changed. What this slide shows is how technology has been employed to change production, and of course, all aspects of distribution and consumption. This increases the speed and quantity of the process, but it also diminishes the demand for labor. This is a fundamental crisis because their profits don't come from these machines. It comes from exploiting our labor, us. If they don't use us as labor, they build more prisons and warehouse us as a sick form of investment and put some other unemployed workers to watch over us as prison guards. Of course, we have to fight for our jobs, and that includes constant fight over contract provisions for how new technology is going to be employed. But we also have to have a vision of survival after the robots and computer software impact all of us. Only the power of workers can confront the ruling class rich and force the sharing of wealth. So to sum up this presentation, it's dealt with some of what you have already covered in the school and set an agenda for our local assemblies plan for political education. The SWA has been developing material for study that needs to be used. One good example is when meatpacking sites were being ravaged by the virus. We put out this analysis. How many of you know about this and have read it? We need you to check the website and spend some time reading it. Check these questions here that were dealt with in this pamphlet. Could you use them on the industry where you work? What is meatpacking? Where is meatpacking? Who owns meatpacking? Who works in meatpacking? Are meatpackers unionized? Can you make a living wage in meatpacking? Are meatpackers healthy? Does government regulate meatpacking? What role does technology play? And what role does community play? You can guide the SWA Education Committee by calling for such an analysis of the industry in which you work. And together we can get that done. So to end this presentation, this is the direction we need to go after this school. 2 paths forward. 1, the Education Committee of the SWA has to get to work to continue preparing educational opportunities. We have PowerPoints and videos that need to be shared and studied. And 2, self-study. I'm going to suggest there are 2 ways to do this. First, we need to connect our discussion with fellow workers to using our phones and computers to do Google searches, to give us information that are directly connected to the conversations that we have and the interests that people have, sometimes about work. It might be about sports or anything, but we want to make a connection with people so that what they think is important. So we need more information. And so our study can be connected to those direct conversations that we're having and that you've discussed in your role playing and so on. We need to use the actual discussions we're having as the basis of our study. So what about taking an hour to do that every week? And second, choose an hour each week, say Saturday morning or Sunday afternoon or whenever you can fit it in, to go to the SWA website, find the information, and study the material that the SWA has developed. Let SWA be one of your teachers. That's how we can move forward. Political education is a necessity. Okay, that's it. Let's talk.